Hi everyone, I'm Dr. D. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender care. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about how your overcompensating history further contributes and feeds into doubts you have today about whether you are transgender. Now, this video is going to be very much more relevant for people who are older. I would say people perhaps 30 and up. That's only because you need to have life experiences in order to accumulate overcompensatory history. For those of you who are younger, you may have some of that history, and I still encourage for you to watch this because in the very least, you can understand how this further can affect any kind of doubts you might have. A while back, I did a video on how the dangers of overcompensating with biological sex, and that video you haven't seen is also going to be relevant because the two of these videos kind of go hand in hand together. But today what I want to dwell into is how actually some of your overcompensating history that you have accumulated inside of you are now causing and contributing to your doubt. What I'm going to be talking about today is the type of history that tends to be incredibly binary. It is a type of history that is historically and culturally and socially in today's world seen as the opposite end of a gender spectrum. So again, we're going to be looking at a very binary history. And the reason why the overcompensatory function of your past is so binary is because sometimes for some of you, in order to repress your true gender identity, you have to overcompensate to an extreme. You have to do very extreme stereotypical activities that belong to particular gender in order to just kind of stuff away the gender identity. And now I will explain to you how that history that you have accumulated fits into your dot. So what am I talking about? If you identify as a trans woman or trans femme, your history, I bet, some of your overcompensatory history was you were either enlisted in military, in Air Force, in Army, any kind of Air Force type of things. You were either engaged in activities or had a career that is stereotypically very masculine according to our gender norms in our society. And that would be maybe construction type of work. Or you could have engaged in some other activities, maybe bodybuilding. Again, we're talking about things that are very binary in accordance to our society and belong to very extreme of a gender spectrum. For those of you who identify as a transmasculine or trans man, your history would have been something that is incredibly stereotypically considered to be feminine type of things. So for example, maybe you were in a beauty pageant, or maybe you were awarded as a prom queen of your high school. Maybe you were in a ballet or some other stereotypically very strong feminine type of activities. Or maybe you were into some kind of modeling career or whatnot. Again, I hate to stereotype here, but unfortunately this is what happens. That's because some of you, for a lot of you, you had to engage in a very extreme in order to unconsciously convince yourself that you really belong to the gender. So as a result, you accumulate this history, right? So as a result, what happens is that some of you now have this bank account of history, if you will, sitting inside of your psyche. So what happens now, you're older, you're living your life, you're having experiences, and you're suddenly starting to realize you are suffering from gender dysphoria. You're suddenly starting to realize that the gender you were assigned at birth is not something that is incongruent to who you are, and you don't feel comfortable with who you are. And not only are you now doubting, like I said in my other video, whether your mind can make it up, not only are you sitting there wondering, am I going crazy? Is my mind making this up? But now, if you have this past history that is very gender specific, overcompensatory, that is also firstly feed into doubts, and this is why. So those of you who have been in the military in the past, you're sitting there and you're telling yourself this: I can't possibly be a woman, because if I was a woman, there's no way I would have served in the military. There's no way I would have been in war. There's no way I could have done bodybuilding. There's no way that I could have done this and that. Because it's in such an extreme proportion to the gender you find yourself being right now, to the gender that is your true authentic self. Your mind is telling you there's no way you possibly can be, because if you were, you would have never had that history. If you really were a woman, you would have never served in the military. If you were a woman, you would have never done bodybuilding. If you were a woman, you would have never served in a war, etc., etc., etc. It's the same thing for those of you who identify as transmasculine. You're sitting there and you're starting to have all of these feelings too about incongruency, and you're realizing that you're identifying more closer to the masculine side of the spectrum, whatever that spectrum and where you find yourself on the spectrum. And you're sitting there and you're telling yourself, there's no way. How can I possibly be a transmasculine or a trans man if I was a queen of my high school, if I was a beauty pageant, if I have a background history of a modeling career, all of those type of things. And that further creates even more doubt, because you are holding your past history as a way, as kind of, in a way you're holding it as some kind of data to tell you so much about your gender today. And that's not really the correct way to do it, because your history, for those of you, especially for all of you who are watching my videos who are struggling with gender dysphoria, the reason why you have such overcompensatory history to begin with is because you are struggling with gender dysphoria and you needed to go to such extreme. You needed to go to such extreme back then in order to repress it, to stuff it down, to not have any thoughts, to not have any feelings of gender dysphoria. That's why you had to go to that extreme. That history, that overcompensatory history, in no way is a factual data that should be telling you, I'm not a woman because I used to serve in the military. It's not really in direct proportion to your gender dysphoria. All it's telling you is that that's something you overcompensated with. So you have to be careful how that history is going to now play into your doubts or any kind of doubts that you're going to have. And you can't really hold that as a measuring stick, if you will, to whether or not you are transgender. What you need to be holding as a measuring stick to whether you are transgender today is how are you feeling in relationship to your biological sex? How do you feel in relationship to secondary sex characteristics? What those sex characteristics communicate to the world in terms of today's gender constructs? Whether you're comfortable with them, whether you're not comfortable, whether things are causing you gender dysphoria. What you need to be holding as a measuring stick today is how you're feeling right now, not the history of your past, because just like a lot of people are looking for history of experiencing gender dysphoria when they were very young, and a lot of you don't have that history, that is also not a measuring stick that you are not transgender. The same way overcompensatory history can be very tricky again, because it's so extremely binary and so extreme on the other end of a spectrum. So be careful with that. If you're watching this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I get a lot of people who work with me who have military background. I have a lot of people who working with me that have very stereotypical feminine background. In no way does that negate the fact that you truly have a trans identity. All is that saying, and it's actually all it's showing to you, is to what extent you psychologically had to go to in order to deal with gender dysphoria in the past. And maybe back then that's what you needed to do in order to survive. And maybe back then that actually helped you to survive. But today, if you do have gender dysphoria, again, like I said in the video, age 28 and up, if you have gender dysphoria, you don't just wake up one day thinking you're transgender. That just doesn't happen. It just means that that part of your identity is now has an opportunity to come to the surface, and you have to deal with it. So comment below, let me know, what is your overcompensating, very gender-specific history? How that has been affecting your doubts? Because I bet it has been. It tends to affect a lot of you. It tends to really make a lot of you doubt yourself, thinking that if I've done A, I can be B. And that type of causality is not really healthy. And a lot of times we tend to overcompensate in ways that are in complete contradiction and in complete opposite in relationship to who we truly are. So comment below, let me know. I'd love to hear your comments, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye.